Week 2 in the Big 12 wrapped up. Anthony Totri, Eric Ruby from PHNX Sun Devils here to break down another wild, wacky week in the conference. Ruby, I want to start with the number 12 team in the country, the Arizona State Sun Devils, falling short on the road to the Mississippi State Bulldogs, 24-20. The second half comeback wasn't enough for Dilly's Devils.
A complete and utter disappointment for this team.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other way to put it. The second half, they played great. That's absolutely true. The reality is they shouldn't have to play great in the second half to lose by 4 points.
Yeah.
Do they have the talent to win this conference? Yes. Have they played at the level to win this conference? No. Week 3 against Texas State needs to be a win. Week 4 against Baylor, we'll see what this team is really made of.
Biggest concern for me looking at this game, and again, the week 1 win over NAU has been the play calling thus far for Marcus Arroyo, somebody that was in the contention to be one of the top assistants, specifically potentially the top offensive coordinator a year ago. Feels like there's just a little bit of a disconnect with some of the play calling offensively, specifically early in games. Like you said, though, Arizona State needs to get back on track against Texas State in week 3. Moving along to another team that had an opportunity to get a massive win today, but fell well short of it, and that is the Oklahoma State Cowboys, losing on the road to Dan Lanning's Oregon Ducks, the number 6 Oregon Ducks, 69-3. Dante Moore and company absolutely bludgeoned the Cowboys.
Dan Lanning wants to retire Mike Gundy. I don't think that's a far-fetched thing to say.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that we're sitting at this point with Oklahoma State, obviously 1-1 on the season, but what is Mike Gundy's future at Oklahoma State?
It's fair, man.
Is maybe one of the bigger questions in the Big 12, not from a contention standpoint, but this is a guy who's synonymous with Oklahoma State, who's synonymous with success.
Synonymous with the Big 12.
Right, and we're looking at a guy that might not be coaching there when you look at 365 days from now. And, of course, there's the beef between Dan Lanning and Mike Gundy as well. Dan Lanning came on top. Out on top.
He did.
Week.
I would say, of course, the big issues when you look at Oklahoma State thus far, despite being 1-1 in the season, the first 2 weeks of the year, is defensively giving up 631 yards, total yards to the Ducks. I know it's the number 6 team in the country, but 631 yards
That's
is
a lot of yards.
lot. And again, I think there are still some questions about the quarterback position for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Zane Flores, the top passer for the Oklahoma State Cowboys, a true freshman quarterback. At the end of the day, Oklahoma State has more questions than answers heading into week 3 of the season. Moving on to a ranked team in the conference that actually got the job done, a team in the Iowa State Cyclones, beating their rival Iowa 16-13 in Ames. Iowa State continues to look good.
Iowa State might be the best team in this conference. Obviously, I think a lot of people look at a 3-point win against an unranked Iowa team and they'll try to play it down. But whenever you play a rivalry game, everything is off the table.
Yeah.
Especially Iowa State feels like the
It's a great rivalry,
game
man.
amongst all of them that's going to end up in a low-scoring game. Iowa State makes big plays when they need to happen. Rocco Becht, not the craziest line, 18-27 for 34 yards and a touchdown, but he got the job done.
He did.
That's all that needs to do with Iowa State, who's now 3-0 on the season.
Yeah, I think for me, when you look at Rocco Becht, something that has really impressed me, especially for the last couple of weeks, is him being able to take care of the football. You look at what they did last week in week 1, only one incompletion. You get to this week, again, 18-27, $134, 1 touchdown, no INTs. He's taking care of the football. He is playing really, really good for the Cyclones. Best team in the conference? I think they might be. Moving on to a team that I think has a claim for the best team in this conference, at least as it stands right now, and that is Kyle Whittingham's Utah Utes, coming in this week as the number 25 team in the country. Left no doubts against Cal Poly, 63-9. Devon Dampier, another really solid game.
Some really great throws from Devon Dampier. I mean, you look at him as a dual threat quarterback, but he was also really just great through the air overall. 17-23 for 192 yards for him. 3 touchdowns in the air as well. Obviously, you beat Cal Poly as the number 25 team in the country. You are expected to beat the crap out of them.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. But 63-9 is a fitting victory. I would not be surprised if they find themselves the early 20s, late teens as far as the top 25 rankings go.
Yeah,
week.
Utah, definitely one of the scarier teams in this conference. 9 of 13 on third down. This is a team in Utah that is hitting on all cylinders, especially that money down. Watch out for Devon Dampier and the Utah Utes. Moving on to what was maybe considered one of the bigger games in the conference this week. That is the Kansas Jayhawks, who were red hot coming into this game against the Missouri Tigers. They end up losing that one 42-31. Jalen Daniels and company fall to 2-1 on the year.
You got to give credit to Jalen Daniels and everybody, though, because Missouri jumped out to an early lead. They looked like they were going to be all over Kansas, and then Kansas jumped back, right? And took a big, massive lead in the first half. Missouri battled back. This was a measuring stick for Kansas, and they ended up losing, and, that has something to do with how good they are as a team, but they competed against Mizzou, and I do think that this might be the year where Kansas is considered a top 4 team in the Big 12, despite this loss early against Mizzou. I have some confidence in Jalen Daniels in his, 6th year starting for the Kansas Jayhawks. Yeah. That's kind of crazy, but I think Kansas is a good football team.
Yeah, Kansas fans in the chat, let me know how frustrated you are with this one, because you look at it, Jayhawks up 21-6 early in this ball game. You know how many total rush yards Kansas had in this one?
I don't.
3 total yards on 19 carries.
Tough.
Inexcusable when you're up 21-6 early on in this game. They let Mizzou storm back again, 42-31. We'll see what Kansas can do next week in this conference. The Cincinnati Bearcats getting a win over the Bowling Green Falcons, 34-20. Rubus, Brendan Sorsby ripped Brendan Sorsby 3 touchdowns on the day.
Good for them. Beating Bowling Green, definitely something that they need.
They beat Drew Pine.
Drew Pine, Arizona State legend. Drew Pine. Yeah, you needed Brendan Sorsby to have 333 yards to the air and 3 touchdowns. A big bounce back win for them against a lower level opponent, but not a good week 1 showing from Cincinnati. Yeah. I think they'll end up being a middle of the pack team somewhere in the Big 12, but we'll see. Maybe Sorsby just had a rough week 1. If he can end up, recreating something like this through the air with his ability to run on the ground like he showed in week 1 as well, that's, a good quarterback. So we'll see where Cincinnati ends up, but I'm not going to give them a ton of credit for beating Bowling Green.
It's Bowling Green. I'm interested to see what that wide receiver duo at Cincinnati is capable of doing as the season continues to move on. Jeff Caldwell, 5 catches, $109 and a touchdown. Joe Royer, 2 catches for 104 yards. Interested to see what those 2 cats are capable of doing in this conference. The Buffs, Coach Prime Sanders, get a needed win to move to 1-1 on the year. They beat the Delaware Blue Hens 31-7.
The Fighting Blue Hens, that is.
And Rubus, we have a team in the thick of a quarterback debacle. 3 quarterbacks playing for Colorado: Caden Salter, Julian Lewis, and then the one that Buffs fans seem to be really, really wanting to see out there next week is Ryan Staub, who was 7 of 10, $157, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because this entire offseason was Salter versus Lewis. Who's going to start for Colorado? Ryan Staub said, I'll just go ahead and take that. 157 yards, 15.7 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Clearly the best quarterback performance. At the end of the day, it is the Delaware Fighting Blue Hens, though. You can't put a ton of stock in this win, but the Buffs pick up a much-needed win after losing to Georgia Tech due to some late-game poor coaching and decision-making in week 1. They end up picking up a win, some big playmakers on the defensive end as well. But we'll see who the quarterback is for Colorado, and I think the next couple of weeks will be really telling to say, is Colorado one of these teams that can compete in the top 6-ish teams in the Big 12? Are they going to be a middle-of-the-pack team this year?
I think that's fair. Moving on to maybe the most disappointing team in the country through the first few weeks of the season, and that is the Kansas State Wildcats, dropping their 2nd game of the season. Reminder, Kansas State played week 0, lost to Iowa State. They beat one of the Dakotas. That one is escaping me in week 1. And then in week 2, you drop to Army 24-21. Salute the troops on that one. Avery Johnson and company not looking good, allowing Army to score 10 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to get that victory.
Yeah, Kansas State looks like the biggest disappointment in the Big 12. Arizona State, lucky that Kansas State looks like the biggest disappointment in the Big 12. This is an Army team that lost to Tarleton State in week 1 in double overtime, 30-27. They pick up a big win, not only against Kansas State, on the road against Kansas State in Manhattan. Big time look in the mirror time for Avery Johnson and Kansas
Break the
State.
mirror. Break the mirror.
This is a team, Totri, that a lot of people picked not only to be in the Big 12 championship, but to win the Big 12. They're starting off the season with 2 losses, one to Iowa State in Ireland and a barely 3-point win over North Dakota, and then a loss to Army at home, a bye game. You got to imagine how much Army was paid in that game as well.
I think it was over $1 million.
This is about as tough as a beginning of the season as you could imagine for a team that was supposed to be competing for that top spot in the Big 12.
Yeah, 100%. And you look at the conversation about non-con wins, what do they mean? Non-con losses, what do they mean? Well, at this point, with 2 losses, we are looking for Kansas State to really, really needs to pick it up when you do get to conference play, if they have any hope of reaching that Big 12 championship game in Dallas. But another team in the Big 12 that fell flat on their face, that is the West Virginia Mountaineers, losing to the Ohio Bobcats 17-10. West Virginia, man, continues to be a unique program.
I thought that they would be one of those like fun but feisty teams in the Big 12
like
this year.
Maybe Cincinnati from last year at times.
If you can't beat Ohio, that's
not good,
tough.
man.
Now, it is on the road in Ohio against them in Athens. I
don't
know
man.
if that means anything.
Come on, man.
But no, West Virginia is I don't want to say a disappointing team, but certainly one of those teams that you say, oh, maybe they can be, one of those sneaky upset type teams. If they lose games like this and continue to play like they did against Ohio, that's a team that you don't need to worry about.
I mean, I think the most frustrating part for West Virginia fans it had to have been the fact that Ohio was just playing keep away. 40 minutes of possession for Ohio to 16 for the West Virginia Mountaineers. At the end of the day, just not good enough from West Virginia. It's a team, again, that needs to really pick it up. These non-con losses, not great, especially to teams like Ohio. You look at Arizona State's loss, you can say, it's an SEC opponent. You can look at Kansas's loss. It's an SEC opponent. Can't lose to a team like Ohio, especially this early on.
Ohio's not in the SEC. Is that what you're telling me?
They are not. They are not. But a team that did beat a team that they were supposed to, the Houston Cougars, beating Rice 35-9. Weigman and the Cougs pick up another needed win, 2-0 to start the year.
Good for them, right? They're not playing crazy competition. We'll see if they can be that feisty team in the Big 12, but beating Rice is not exactly something I'm going to be sitting back and be like, oh, wow, look at Houston. But I feel like Houston's one of those programs where if they could have a surprising season this year, maybe make a bowl game, be a good team in the Big 12, going into next year, you're like, oh, man, what is Willie Fritz and company going to do?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately a really solid game. Connor Weigman had a solid start to the year thus far. Nothing crazy in terms of actual passing yards, but hasn't thrown an interception, 3 touchdowns. Beating bad teams is what solid teams do, and Houston continues to do it. Another team that gets a win over a relatively bad and unknown opponent, that is the UCF Knights, who I crowned as the worst Power 4 team in college football a week ago. They beat North Carolina A&T 68-7. They heard what I had to say.
Sure. I mean, they beat. Say the school they beat again.
Northern Carolina A&T. Can I show you the quarterback?
A&T,
can I show you the quarterback
Please.
of North Carolina A&T? Champ Long.
Come on, that's rude.
You laughed, brother. I was just showing you the quarterback, man.
It's North Carolina A&T. If UCF didn't destroy them in this game, they should have been relegated. That is a game that you're paying how much money?
Too much.
It's got to be over $1 million for
it has
North
to be.
Carolina A&T to go and play against UCF. They're still one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the Big 12.
Not great whatsoever. As we are recording this, a couple of Big 12 opponents, Big 12 teams still in the thick of their game, similar to last week. We can't tell you the future, but we can tell you where these games are at as it stands right now. BYU is going to walk away with a win over the Stanford Cardinal. About 6 minutes and 30 seconds left in that ball game. BYU is up 27-3 over the Cardinal. BYU, man, people were calling them maybe frauds, saying that we weren't talking enough about them after their week 1 victory when they scored 69 points. State. LJ Martin and company taking care of business. Say what you want. It's a Power 4 team in Stanford.
Yeah, good for them beating Stanford as well. And I mean, obviously, we can talk about Arizona, who's most likely going to beat Weber State. Start off 2-0 on the season against some lesser opponents, but a much better start for Brent Brennan than last year, at least from a confidence standpoint in the program. Did we touch on Baylor? I feel like we skipped over Baylor pretty quickly.
Did we skip over Baylor?
I think we might have skipped over Baylor.
You're right. We might have skipped over Baylor.
A double overtime win for Baylor.
Wow, how did I skip over that?
I was sitting there and I was like, are you building up to something?
I am so sorry, Baylor Bear fans. That is 100% on me. Baylor getting an absolute monster win.
I thought you were building up to it.
The best win of the day.
Oh, they're already leaving comments.
I know. I'm so sorry. The best win by a Big 12 team, maybe all year long.
Well, we'll see. It's week 2. But
at least as it stands right now. But you're beating the number 17 team in the country.
Yes.
Yeah, beating the number 17 team in the country in SMU. Sawyer Robertson, man, continues to be just a lethal weapon at quarterback. This guy, this team needed that.
50 times.
This team needed that. This team absolutely needed it. And when it mattered most down the stretch, this is a game that SMU had a chance to win. Their field goal kicker missed a really, really, really long field goal. You go to overtime. The two teams exchange blows. And then ultimately Baylor settles for a field goal at the end. But, man, was it a great game.
Yeah, absolutely massive win for Baylor. Probably the game of the day. When you look at that second quarter where they scored 21 points, I mean, SMU scored 14, but Baylor's offense really getting into a rhythm there. And Sawyer Robertson, right? Like, you're missing your RB1 going into the season. For Baylor, you're still able to go out there, and obviously you lose to Auburn in week 1 in a tough game. You lose by about 14 points, I believe, and then pick up a big win over number 17 SMU. Sawyer Robertson passed for 440 yards.
Yeah.
4 touchdowns.
We knew this guy can sling.
I mean, and a lot of people assumed that Baylor was going to be good on the back of Sawyer Robertson being one of the best, if not, the best quarterback in the Big 12. I think him and Rocco Becht have been up there as two guys that should have their name in that conversation.
Those two and Devon Dampier have been the best 3 quarterbacks in this conference.
Devon Dampier has been very good this year, and Sawyer Robertson absolutely belongs in that conversation as well, playing the toughest team that anybody in the Big 12 played here in week 2 and beating them as well. And I believe that game was on the road.
Yeah, too, it was at SMU.
Which is, I mean, that's a big – and obviously SMU missed a field goal, had a couple of big plays where they missed it. But SMU still put them on their heels, right, with that massive play in overtime as well. I mean, a good win for Aranda and the Baylor Bears. A win where if they lost this game, you could chalk it up to, okay, they played a tough non-con.
But then they're 0-2 to start
Right, and they start off 0-2. This keeps, and I know as weird as it sounds going into week 2, like this keeps those Big 12 championship hopes alive for Baylor. And who knows? I don't know if Baylor gets a number next to their name this week, but I think they're a lot closer than they were last week. And if they do, they're looking at a team where Baylor, if they finish out non-con non-defeated, they're looking at most likely the toughest non-con schedule out of the entire Big 12. And if they go out there with 2 wins and 1 loss, like that's a good 3 games for Baylor, despite the tough loss to Auburn early on in the first game of the season.
Yeah, I think we can all agree, and maybe Baylor fans will disagree with me. Sawyer Robertson, the offense, looked good. That Baylor defense looks very, very suspect, something that needs to get cleaned up when you do get to Big 12 play. Rubus, before we get out of here, the biggest surprise in the conference through 2 weeks.
Arizona State's not a top 3 team in the conference right now. That's the biggest surprise. I mean, if you sit here and you listen to how we talked about this team going into this season, it was they are clearly the number 1 team in the conference. Yeah. And you look at Iowa State and you look at Baylor and you look at Utah and you see teams that have played better football than Arizona State. It's week 2. Lock and play out. Arizona State can completely change that narrative, but I think that is relatively surprising where you're looking at like, okay, man, like Arizona State's not cementing themselves as a top tier, but obviously I still think a bigger surprise than that is Kansas State. Kansas State losing to Army, barely beating North Dakota, losing to Iowa State, obviously in Ireland. Kansas State looks like not a top tier team in the Big 12.
One of the worst teams.
Yeah, they look like one of the worst teams because, again, Army's not a great team. North Dakota is not a great team, right? And Iowa State, Kansas State on the road in Ireland, like that's a tough game.
Not even on the road. It's a neutral environment.
It's a weird game, right? Yeah. And if you chalk that up as, okay, that's a one loss thing, you blow the brakes off of North Dakota, you blow the brakes off of Army, it is what it is. But they didn't do that. Yeah. So Kansas State's the number one biggest surprise, biggest disappointment. But I do think Arizona State at 1-1 right now, as a guy who had expectations for this team to be cemented in the top 10 going out of non-con play, that is also pretty close as the biggest surprise going into week 3.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's got to be the way Iowa State and Rocco Becht are playing right now. Again, 3-0 in this conference. Rocco Becht single-handedly looks like the best quarterback in this conference, despite losing his 2,000-yard receivers last season, or over the offseason. And it doesn't even feel like there's been an Iowa State wide receiver to this point in the year that has really solidified themselves as the go-to guy. Rocco Becht is just that good at quarterback right now. Guys, let us know in the comments through 2 weeks in the Big 12, who is the biggest surprise, maybe the biggest disappointment. Make sure you hit the like button, you hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.
Sweet.